Now to continue with the painting weights, there's a couple of good tricks I use actually to make it a bit easier to get around the model, speed things up a lot. Right now we're looking at the entire character all the time, and if you're trying to paint weights and you have this part of the character selected, you're always looking back through the rest of the character. You're trying to look at fingers, and you're seeing through to the rest of the character. It can be just a hassle that you end up looking at all of this. Well, what you can do is you can actually hide parts of the mesh. Best way to do that is go back down below skin, add an edit mesh modifier, enter the sub-object polygon, or even if your character is made up of multiple pieces that's all attached together to be skinned all at once, use the element mode, and you can actually go in and do several things. One of them being just simply grabbing and hiding all of those elements that you don't want to see, or the polygons that you don't want to see. This will make it a lot easier for us as we work on things. I'm actually going to hide off the fingers that we're not going to want to work with right away, and leave it so we only have to look at one index finger and the thumb, get that right, and then we can work on the others. So now we can just simply see just that part of the character that we're looking for. What's also nice, if you use the element, if you do have separate elements, you can actually move the elements. We have baked the weights, therefore you're not going to actually change anything by moving parts of the model around underneath skin. The weights have been baked into the each bone, and they're going to stay that way. So you could actually go in and you could pick an element, and you could completely move that element, say the fingernails in this case, here to get them out of the way. And you could completely move them down out of the way of the rest of the skinning, so we didn't have to see them. This is going to be a handy tool for us right now, because these fingernails might just sort of get in our way. We may end up painting on them by mistake or something, so you could actually get them completely out of the way and go about weighting what we have here. In this case, I'm just going to move them down out of the way for now, and hide them as well, so they're not even in our way. Because right now, if we paint in this area, and we actually try and use the paint weighting, we'll be painting on the fingernail before we'll be painting on the finger underneath. We might want to actually weight the finger underneath first, get that right, then pop the nails back in. So this way I've actually just moved the nails out of the way, hidden them, and now when I paint, I'm not going to be painting directly on those nails because they're not actually there anymore. They're moved down below. Now you can go back. We can actually start working on these parts of the character as we need to work on them. Let's work on the forearm a bit more in the elbow area. I've actually added a bunch more animation now to this so that we get a bit better idea of what the shoulder actually has to go through for a range of motion. So this is sort of my first motion test. Let's actually take a look at from frame 30 on to frame 50. We've got a whole arm twist going on. Of course, we have to remember that things like the bone down the back of your arm should try and stay in somewhat of a straight line. Right now it's jaggy all over the place. Muscles and whatnot should be flexing around the arm in an even fashion as they get stretched around the arm. Obviously that's not happening. We're going to use a couple of tools to do that right now. One, again, paint weighting, and just go ahead and paint in some extra weighting in areas to try and grab what we need. So increase the weight back up to 0.7 here. And it's actually a little bit hard to see when you use the click and drag method. Sure, over the right color background. There we go. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try and firm up this bone area to the center twist bone. And it should probably pull all the way up into the elbow area a little bit. And again, the animation's not even there just to get the poses, but you also want the motion between the poses. You actually want to see what it looks like when it bends and flexes from one pose to the next. So you can actually see that whole arm bone is starting to move a little bit more naturally. One of the other things I've actually added to the set of painting tools scripts on my site is also just set paint weight to 0.02, so you don't have to keep dialing it down to that. I should probably add 0.07 as well, because I tend to use that a lot as well. But now it's a matter of just playing back and forth and trying to find problem areas. You can see that this has been weighted very poorly. It's being, this row of verts in the center here is weighted quite strongly to the center bone, but these ones aren't, and so we're getting this bit of a sort of tearing feeling happening here through the lower arm. So we're going to have to go through and just paint some of these weights back in. Try to get a bit of a nicer fall off through this this part of the muscle. And again, it's a bit of give and take, so I may have to add a bit more back into the original forearm bone. See if I can get a nice soft twist going on in the muscles, and don't have anything where it starts looking like it's tearing or pulling the model in strange directions that shouldn't be. Now this is all nice. I mean, we can sit here and paint back and forward, but you're often in a position where sometimes you end up weighting vertices a bit odd. You're not getting as nice as soft a fall off as you want between things, and you can sit there playing with the vertex weightings back and forth, and you always end up painting on the wrong thing or going in and selecting each one, trying to even them out. Best thing for that is paint blend weights. There is no actual option in Mag 6 for paint blend weights. It was never added to the interface. However, it was added to the code. This was just because there was no time to test it. But as it turns out, there was nothing wrong with the code to begin with. So you can actually get script access to it again. And again, of course, on my website, part of the skin tools is skin paint blend mode on off. Going into that mode requires a bit more weight on the paintbrush. You need to turn up the value of the paintbrush a bit. Nice big area, and what it does is it sort of normalizes the weights, and it blurs them or blends them together a bit. Might be a bit strong. This way you can actually paint over areas. What it'll do is it'll even out the weights between the bones that affect that that vertice, or in this case all the vertices that I paint over. It's great because now you can actually soften areas completely and making sure they're a little more even, so you can see all the weights starting to even out. I find it best to do it with each bone. This is a great way of sort of correcting areas. So sometimes I'll even go through the process of just a hard weighting up to a bone, just dialing up all the vertices in area to a bone, dialing up all the next set of vertices to the next bone, and then just using the blend brush to blend between the two and soften the joints between them. So now our forearm is actually twisting quite nicely. Once we have mesh smooth on that, it'll soften it out a bit more and make it nice and blend nicely. So now you can see the muscles spinning and rotating a bit. I'm going to actually paint a bit more weight into the this muscle here. Of course, let's back to a 0.2 instead of the 0.44, which would, or 0.2 something I think I had it finally set at, which would have just painted way too much weighting in. So with the paint weight brush, you want really low settings, and the paint blend a little bit higher at 0.2, 0.3, 0.4 to get it to do any amount of sort of changes to it. So that area is looking pretty good. Now we can go onto our finger and actually check the finger as well and start working on it. We're going to need some animation on it to do that. So again, let's go in, grab the controls that we've currently animated, think I have a filter on. Yeah, show all keys. Animate back up and back down again, and then from here I'm just going to extend my timeline some using the Alt Control mouse button combinations to get what I want. And then I'm going to go in and animate the hand. So let's just set frame 90. Let's just set the hand. Let's just say key all. So it comes down and stops. And then we can go about setting some poses. Let's just work strictly on the index finger at this point. Let's try and get its flexing looking nice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to curve the finger up into a sort of a fist position. Again, we've got fairly simple controls on these fingers, where we only have one slider for the last two bones. In complicated rigs, I make a slider for essentially every way it's going to be used. So now that one curves up, let's actually just do a key all on all of them. Reset it, and let's also bend it up backwards so we can see what happens backwards a bit. So the character was actually pointing or pushing his finger on something. We can see that there's problems around the finger area as well. So now you can see that when we actually try and paint weights on this, we're not going to actually be painting weights on everything else around it. This is because the paint brush won't allow me to paint over here. There's nothing there to paint on. The polygons are gone. You do have to be a bit careful though. If you've noticed, it's actually allowing me to paint over onto the ones next to it. And it looks like actually the exclude allows me to actually paint on them, which is something I wasn't actually aware of until about now. Doesn't actually completely exclude them. How about that? So the problem with this is that we can't actually just go crazy with our paintbrush, even with the excludes on there. We have to be pretty careful that we don't paint over into an area that's not visible. The vertices still exist actually, which is kind of a bit of a problem. You can still paint over onto them, so you do have to be a bit careful, but it's a lot easier to see what you're doing. Try and fix some of the obvious areas, like here where the bone in the finger doesn't completely affect underneath. So I'm going to shore that up. And it looks like I may have to go and kill the weighting that I'm accidentally painting into that next finger. Trying to get the knuckles nice and soft and deforming nicely between the joints is a key as well. You can get crashing fingers really quickly by not paying attention. Again, if you're never getting close to the fingers, it's not going to matter much, but if you don't know, or you are simply doing it, then you've got to work a lot on the fingers to get the weights to look correct. The end of the finger should completely move with the end bone, so I can go around and you could actually set the weights quite high and paint onto it, so you make sure you get it, get every part of it. Looks to me like there's far too much weight with the finger for the main hand bone, so I'm actually going to have to paint some weight in. On this knuckle here. into the hand bone so that it doesn't collapse the way it was collapsing before when we actually bend the finger back. So here we have is a little bit better solution going on now. See, it's animating a little bit better, bending and flexing a bit better. I might want to concern myself with the overlap between the thumb and here, because there's a big stretchy piece of skin in here. And again, we could do much more to it to get it to look perfect with all kinds of rigging systems, but I'm not sure that's going to be necessary in this character and how we're doing it. So I'm just going to try and paint in a bit of weight and just see if I can get a nice soft area between those two. So it looks a little bit more natural, like the skin working in there. Same with the thumb then. Go ahead and actually weight that and get that to look the way it's supposed to. Another way to make sure you don't weight something by mistake, or not by mistake, but actually take the weights off, is to go in and select those vertices and use the ABS effect and just type in 0. Typing in 0, though, you got to be a little bit careful. What it's actually doing is it's removing the weight of those vertices and putting that weight back evenly into any bone that currently affects them. So if there were multiple bones that affected those vertices, it's going to take that weight and actually add it to several bones if several bones are also affecting it. Another way of doing it is to actually pick the vertices and weight them back to be 100% back to that one bone. May also not be what you want, because you might want multiple bones affecting it, and you've just completely removed that. So it's always a bit of give and take to get your skinning quite right. Once we're done with it, and you've actually played around and got this all right, do one of two things. You can just delete the edit mesh modifier or just turn it off, and then you can immediately see what the rest of the character looks like. This means at any point in time you can actually just flick on and off that edit mesh, and you can actually see a reduced character essentially. Can help a lot.